The console beeped 3 times before Plevin noticed it. He had been reviewing stellar charts for the past 4 hours, his 4 eyes straining against the data streams that floated across his screen. Research Station Verdes 7 rarely received traffic this far from the main transit lanes, which made the work peaceful but sometimes mind-numbing. The beeping continued. Plevin tapped the console with one of his 3 fingers, bringing up the external sensors. What he saw made his blood run cold. 6 ships, unregistered, moving in formation toward the station. "Dr. Haven," Plevin called across the laboratory, "we have company." The insectoid scientist looked up from his microscope, antennae twitching. "Assembly inspection. We weren't scheduled for another cycle." No identification codes, no hailing, just approaching on an intercept course. Haven's mandibles clicked nervously. In the 3 years they had operated Verdes 7, nothing like this had happened. The station existed to study the unique radiation patterns of the nearby gas giant. 12 researchers, no weapons, no real defenses beyond basic hull plating. Plevin activated the emergency broadcast system. His voice, usually calm during lectures and reports, now carried an edge he had never heard in himself. "All personnel to the central hub. This is not a drill." Within minutes, the small crew gathered. They came from 6 different species, united by their love of science and their belief that the galaxy had moved beyond the age of violence. The assembly had promised them safety. The research stations operated under the protection of treaties older than some of their home civilizations. "I'm sending the distress signal now," Plevin said, his fingers dancing across the communication panel. "The nearest assembly way station should receive it in minutes." The response came back faster than expected. An automated voice, pleasant and unhurried, filled the room. "Your distress call has been received and logged. Assembly peacekeepers will be dispatched to your location. Estimated arrival time, 6 to 8 standard cycles. Please secure all research data and prepare for evacuation protocols." 6 to 8 cycles, nearly 40 hours. "They'll be here in 20 minutes, whispered Rena, the youngest researcher. She was Centauri like Plevin, barely past her adult molting. This was her first deep space assignment. Plevin pulled up the tactical display. The 6 ships had stopped accelerating. They hung in space just beyond weapons range, though Verdes 7 had no weapons to speak of. Waiting, planning. "Why aren't they responding to hails?" Dr. Haven asked. "Because they know we can't stop them," said Borvin, the station's maintenance engineer. He was a Thurian, broad and scaled, but even his species had abandoned warfare generations ago. "They're pirates, or scavengers, looking for anything valuable." "We're a research station," Rena said. "We don't have anything worth stealing." "They don't know that yet." The ships began moving again. Slowly, deliberately. They separated, forming a net around the station's possible escape vectors. Not that Verdes 7 could escape. The station had minimal thrust capability, designed only for minor orbital adjustments. Plevin sealed the inner doors and activated what few defensive measures they had. Emergency bulkheads, reinforced airlocks, systems designed to protect against solar storms and micrometeorite impacts, not against determined borders. "Everyone to the medical bay," he ordered. "It's the most reinforced section. We seal ourselves in and wait for the assembly." They moved quickly, gathering personal effects and crucial data cores. The medical bay could sustain all 12 of them for several days if necessary. Plevin took one last look at the laboratory that had been his home. 3 years of research, discoveries about stellar radiation that would advance their understanding of star formation. None of it mattered if they didn't survive. The first impact came as they sealed the medical bay door. The entire station shuddered. Alarms screamed. Red emergency lights bathed everything in crimson. "They're cutting through the outer airlock," Borvin said, his scaled face pressed against a monitor. "Professional work. They've done this before." Plevin checked the distress beacon, still transmitting, still broadcasting their desperate need for help into the empty void. The assembly would come. They had to. That was the promise. That was the foundation of civilization itself. Another impact, closer now. The raiders were making steady progress. How long until they reach us? Dr. Heaven asked. Borvin studied the cutting patterns. 40 minutes, maybe less if they have plasma torches. 40 minutes, and the assembly was still 39 hours away. Plevin had never felt so helpless. He was a scientist, not a soldier. None of them were. They had chosen this life specifically to avoid violence, to pursue knowledge in the peaceful darkness between stars. The galaxy was supposed to be safe. The assembly was supposed to protect them. The cutting sounds grew louder, clearer. The raiders were through the outer hull now, moving through the storage sections, searching, taking what they wanted. It was only a matter of time before they reached the medical bay, before they cut through that final door. Plevin looked at his colleagues, at Rena's terrified face, at Haven's trembling antennae, at Borvin's clenched fists. "We don't fight," Plevin said quietly. "When they come through, we cooperate. We give them whatever they want. Our lives are worth more than equipment or data." They all nodded. It was the civilized response, the assembly-approved response. Violence begat violence. Cooperation saved lives. The distress beacon continued its steady pulse. Help was coming, just not soon enough. Rita Okonkwo hated diplomatic conferences. 3 days of meetings about trade protocols and cultural exchange programs had left her desperate for something, anything, to break the monotony. When the distress signal cut through the Nightingale's communication array, she almost smiled. "Captain, we're picking up an emergency broadcast," said her communications officer, Danny Park. "Research station under attack. Coordinates indicate they're about 4 hours from our current position." Rita pulled up the navigation display. 4 hours at standard cruise. What's the assembly response time? Their dispatch from Waystation Kepler 7. Estimated arrival is 39 hours. 39 hours, Rita shook her head. That station will be stripped clean or worse by then. Her first officer, Louis Reyes, looked up from his tactical station. "We're not technically authorized for emergency response in this sector. The diplomats were very clear about not overstepping." "The diplomats can file a complaint later," Rita said. "Plot an intercept course. Maximum burn." "Maximum burn will put us at 5 GS, Louis warned. "Most species consider that reckless." "Most species aren't from Earth. Navigation, how fast can we get there?" The navigator, Sophie Durand, ran the calculations. 42 minutes if we push the engines hard. We'll arrive before the raiders finish whatever they're doing. Rita activated the ship-wide comm. "All hands, this is the captain. We're responding to a distress call. Strap in for high-G maneuvers. Combat team, prepare for boarding action." The Nightingale was technically a diplomatic transport, but every human ship carried security personnel trained for situations exactly like this. Rita had argued for it during the initial contact protocols. The assembly representatives had been horrified. Humans bringing weapons to peace talks. But Earth had learned hard lessons about being unprepared. The galaxy might be mostly peaceful, but mostly wasn't the same as always. The ship's engines roared to life. Rita felt the pressure build as they accelerated. 5 times Earth's gravity, uncomfortable but manageable with the right training and equipment. The gel seats absorbed most of the force, and their enhanced physiology handled the rest. "Send a message to the station," Rita ordered. "Let them know help is coming." Danny worked his console. "Their communication array is damaged. I'm getting fragmented signals only. They know someone's approaching, but they might not know it's us." "Keep trying. I don't want them thinking we're more raiders." The minutes crawled by. Rita reviewed the tactical data. 6 raider ships, older models, probably independent operators rather than organized crime. The research station had zero defensive capability. Standard assembly design philosophy. Why arm a science station when the assembly promised protection? Approaching the station now, Sophie announced. Raider ships are clustered around the main structure. Looks like they're in the middle of a boarding operation. Rita studied the display. The raiders had formed a defensive perimeter, clearly expecting assembly peacekeepers to eventually show up. But they weren't expecting anyone for another 38 hours. They were taking their time, being thorough. Lewis, take your team and prep for insertion. I want minimal casualties on all sides. These raiders might be desperate, not evil. Understood, non-lethal unless absolutely necessary. And Lewis, keep our people safe first. The station crew will understand if things get rough. He nodded and headed for the airlock. Rita watched on the internal cameras as the combat team suited up. 12 humans in tactical armor, carrying weapons that would make the assembly's diplomatic corps faint. Stun rounds, restraint foam, shock batons. And yes, lethal options as backup, because hopping for the best didn't mean ignoring the worst. Captain, I'm getting a response from the station, Danny said. Audio only. They sound terrified. Put them through. A voice filled the bridge, trembling and desperate. Unknown vessel, this is Research Station Verdes 7. We are under attack. Please identify yourself. Are you assembly peacekeepers? Rita grabbed the comm. Verdes 7, this is Captain Rita Okonkwo of the human vessel Nightingale. We received your distress call and are moving to assist. Peacekeepers are still many hours out. We're what you've got right now. Silence, then quietly, human from the death world. Rita winced. Earth's classification as a Class 12 death world had become something of a reputation problem. Most species heard death world and assumed humans were barely civilized barbarians who had somehow stumbled into space travel. Yes, from Earth. We're the ones who answered your SOS. Now hold tight, we're coming in. Wait, your approach vector is insane. You're moving too fast. You'll never make a safe docking at that speed. Sophie grinned. Watch us. The Nightingale came in hot, revering thrust at the last possible second. G-forces spiked to 7. Rita's vision tunneled slightly, but she kept her focus on the tactical display. The raider ship scattered, clearly not expecting such an aggressive approach. Perfect docking, Sophie announced. Airlock sealed, boarding team is go. Rita watched as Lewis and his team crossed into the station. The raiders were caught off guard, probably still trying to process how a ship had approached at speeds that should have been suicidal. Open a channel to the raider ships, Rita ordered. Let's give them a chance to reconsider their life choices. Danny patched her through. Rita kept her voice calm, professional. Attention raider vessels. This is Captain Okonkwo. You are attacking a protected research station. Withdraw now and we can discuss this peacefully. Continue your attack and we will stop you by force. You have 60 seconds to decide. The response came quickly. Laughter, then a rough voice. You're a diplomatic ship with maybe a dozen security personnel. We're 6 ships with full crews. Do the math, human. Rita smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. I did the math. That's why I'm giving you 60 seconds. Your time starts now. Louis Reyes moved through the station's corridors with practiced efficiency. Behind him, his team spread out in a formation that would have looked bizarre to anyone trained in assembly peacekeeping tactics. Humans didn't move in neat lines. They flowed like water, covering angles, watching each other's backs with an instinctive coordination born from Earth's violent history. Command, we're inside, Lewis reported. Multiple breach points. Raiders are working their way toward the central hub. Rita's voice came through his helmet. Station crew is barricaded in the medical bay. Raiders will reach them in about 10 minutes. You need to get there first. Copy that. The station was a mess. Storage compartments hung open, their contents scattered. The raiders had been thorough, taking anything that looked valuable. Lewis spotted movement ahead and raised his fist. His team froze. 3 raiders rounded the corner, arms full of scientific equipment. They saw the humans and dropped everything. One of them, a Kravian with purple skin and too many arms, reached for a weapon. "Don't," Lewis said quietly. His rifle wasn't pointed at them, not yet. "Put your hands where I can see them, all of them." The Kravian hesitated. Its companion, something reptilian that Lewis didn't recognize, hissed nervously, "You're human, from the Deathworld." "That's right, and you're robbing a science station, not your best decision." "We're just trying to survive," the Kravian said. "Our colony collapsed. The assembly abandoned us. We need supplies, medicine, anything we can sell." Lewis studied them. Their ships were old. Their weapons were older. These weren't professional pirates. They were desperate refugees doing what they thought they had to do. "There's better ways to survive than this," Lewis said. "But we can talk about that later. Right now, I need you to sit down against that wall and stay quiet. When this is over, we'll figure something out." "You're not going to kill us." "Not unless you make me. Now sit." They sat. Lewis had his team secure them with restraint cuffs, the kind that would release automatically after a few hours if nobody came to collect them. Then he kept moving. The sounds of cutting grew louder as they approached the medical bay. Lewis counted at least 8 raiders working on the door. They had plasma torches and were making steady progress. Inside, he could hear frightened voices. The station crew, trapped and helpless. "This is your one warning," Lewis called out. "Step away from that door." The raiders spun around. They outnumbered the humans and several of them had weapons. A standoff developed in the narrow corridor. Lewis could see the calculation in their eyes. Could they take the humans? Was it worth the risk? One of them, a scarred veteran with cybernetic implants, made the decision for everyone. He raised his weapon. Lewis moved faster. His first shot took the gun out of the veteran's hand. His second shot hit the raider's leg, a stun round that locked up his muscles and dropped him to the floor. The rest of the human team fired in controlled bursts. Stun rounds, restraint foam, shock rounds that incapacitated without killing. The fight lasted maybe 20 seconds. When it ended, 8 raiders lay unconscious or restrained on the floor. None of them were seriously hurt. None of them were dead. Lewis's team took defensive positions while he approached the medical bay door. "Station crew, this is Lewis Reyes with the human rescue team. The raiders are neutralized. You're safe now. I'm going to open this door." Silence, then a trembling voice. "How do we know you're not just more raiders?" "You don't," Lewis admitted. "But your other option is to stay locked in there until the assembly shows up in 38 hours. Your choice." The door slid open slowly. Lewis saw 12 aliens pressed against the far wall, staring at him with expressions ranging from fear to confusion. They had expected assembly peacekeepers in their neat blue uniforms. Instead, they got humans in black tactical armor, carrying weapons that looked like they belonged in a war zone. A Centauri with 4 eyes stepped forward. "I'm Plevin, station director. You're really here to help us." "That's the plan. Anyone hurt?" "No, we sealed ourselves in before they could reach us." "Good. My team will escort you to our ship. Captain Okonkwo wants you safe while we clean up this mess." "Clean up?" An insected alien, Dr. Haven, clicked his mandibles nervously. "What about the raiders?" "We'll handle them, non-lethally if possible." "But there are dozens of them still on the station," Plevin said, "and more on their ships. You only have a small team." Lewis smiled behind his helmet. "We're from Earth. Small teams are what we do best." Over the next 30 minutes, Lewis and his team moved through the station systematically. They found raiders in groups and alone, surprised them before they could react, disabled them with precision that came from years of training. Every encounter ended the same way: raiders on the floor, restrained but alive, wondering what had just hit them. Sophie, who had joined the boarding team as their medic, treated injuries on both sides with equal care. A raider with a broken arm from resisting got the same attention as a human who had taken a glancing blow. This seemed to confuse the raiders more than anything else. "Why are you helping us?" one of them asked as Sophie set his arm. "We attacked the station." "Because you're hurt," Sophie said simply. "I'm a medic, that's what I do." By the time they secured the last group of raiders, the station was quiet again. Lewis did a final count. 43 raiders total, 0 fatalities, a few injuries, all treatable. His team had performed exactly as trained. "Command station is secure," Lewis reported. "All hostiles detained, no casualties on either side." "Good work," Rita replied. "The raider ships are still holding position. They're demanding we release their people. Tell them we'll discuss terms. But first, I think we need to have a conversation with these folks. Something tells me there's more to this story." Lewis gathered the raider leaders in the station's common area. The scarred veteran with cybernetic implants seemed to be in charge. His name was Horvath, and up close, Lewis could see the desperation in his eyes. "You're from the Devlin colony," Lewis said, recognizing some of their equipment markings. "The one that lost orbital stability." Horvath nodded bitterly. 3,000 people. The assembly promised evacuation ships. They never came. We managed to save maybe 200 using every ship we could scavenge. We've been living in those rust buckets for 6 months, trying to find work, find supplies, find anything. "So you turned to piracy." "We turned to survival. Nobody would hire refugees. Nobody would trade with us. The assembly classified us as displaced persons and told us to wait for proper relocation. We're still waiting." Lewis studied the raider. Horvath wasn't lying. Lewis had seen enough desperate people to recognize the real thing. "What you did here was wrong. You scared those researchers half to death." "I know, but my people are starving. The children we saved are sick. We needed medicine, food, anything we could sell for supplies." "There's still better ways." "Are there? Because from where I'm sitting, the galaxy doesn't care what happens to us." Lewis made a decision. He had the authority to make recommendations, and Rita would back him up. Maybe it's time that changed. Dr. Haven watched in fascination as Sophie worked. The human medic had converted part of the station's laboratory into a treatment area, and she moved between patients with efficiency that seemed almost supernatural. 3 raiders with serious injuries. 2 station crew members suffering from stress-related illness. She treated all of them with the same calm competence. "This raider has a compound fracture," Haven observed, his antennae twitching. "Among my people, this would require hospitalization for several cycles." Sophie glanced at the X-ray display. "It's definitely broken, but the bone alignment is good. I've set it, given him pain medication, and applied a regenerative cast. He'll be uncomfortable for a few days, but he should heal fine." "A few days, that's impossible." "For you, maybe, but Kravians have decent healing factors. Not as good as humans, but better than Centauri." She moved to the next patient, a young raider who had been hit with a stun round. "This one just needs rest. The electrical shock disrupted his nervous system, but there's no permanent damage." Having studied the readings, by assembly medical standards, this patient should be in intensive care. The stun round had delivered enough voltage to stop a Thurian in its tracks, but Sophie was right. The raider's vitals were already stabilizing. "You treat injuries that would kill most species as minor inconveniences," Haven said. Sophie smiled. "Earth teaches you to bounce back quick. You should see what our field medics deal with in disaster zones." In the common area, Plevin sat across from Rita. The human captain had removed her helmet, revealing a face that seemed too calm for someone who had just led a combat operation. She poured him something from a container. "What is this?" Plevin asked. "Water, plain, simple, boring water. You've been stressed for hours. Hydration helps." Plevin sipped it carefully. "I need to thank you for saving us, But I also need to understand what happens now. The raiders, the station, your unauthorized intervention in assembly space. Let's tackle those one at a time, Rita said. First, the raiders. Lewis tells me they're refugees from the Devlin colony collapse. That doesn't excuse attacking a research station. No, it doesn't, but it does explain it. Have you read the reports about Devlin? 3,000 colonists. The assembly promised evacuation. Only a handful survived because they ignored protocol and launched their own rescue. Plevin's skin flushed darker. He had read the reports. The Devlin incident was a bureaucratic nightmare that the assembly was still trying to sweep under the proverbial rug. Evacuation ships delayed by paperwork. Emergency protocols requiring 17 different approvals. By the time help arrived, most of the colony had died in the orbital collapse. The assembly made mistakes, Plevin admitted, but that doesn't justify piracy. Agreed. So instead of prosecution, how about rehabilitation? Earth has programs for exactly this kind of situation. Refugee integration, job training, psychological support. We could take them. You would accept criminals into your society. We'd accept people who made bad choices because they had no good options. There's a difference. Rita leaned forward. Look, I've read your file, Plevin. You're a good scientist and a decent person, but you've lived your whole life in the Assembly's protection. You've never had to make the choice between survival and morality. And humans have. Every single day for thousands of years. Earth doesn't forgive easily. We had to learn forgiveness the hard way by understanding that people aren't just good or evil. They're complicated, and sometimes the worst actions come from the best intentions. Horvath entered the room, escorted by Lewis. The raider leader looked exhausted. His injuries had been treated, but the weight of his situation showed in every movement. "I've been told you want to talk," Horvath said to Rita. "I want to offer you an alternative. You and your people come with us. We process you through Earth's refugee program. It's not easy, you'll have to work, but you'll have food, medicine, safety, and eventually a chance to rebuild." "Why would you do this? We attacked your allies." "You attacked a station in desperation. There's a difference between raiders who enjoy violence and people pushed to extremes. I've seen both. You're the second kind." Horvath looked at Plevin. "What does the assembly say?" Plevin struggled with the answer. Assembly protocol was clear. Raiders should be prosecuted, their ships impounded, their actions punished as a deterrent. But he had also seen how Sophie treated the wounded without prejudice, how Lewis had disabled rather than killed, how Rita was offering second chances instead of revenge. "The assembly will want you tried and sentenced," Plevin said slowly. "That's the official position, but personally I think Captain Okonkwo's offer is more just." "You'd support this?" Horvath asked, "even after we terrorized your crew?" "You didn't hurt anyone. You could have, but you didn't. That suggests you're not beyond redemption." Rita smiled. "Then it's settled. Horvath, I'll need a list of everyone in your group. Medical conditions, special needs, skills. We'll transport you to the nearest human coordination center." "What about our ships?" "Honestly, they look like they're held together with hope and spare wire. We'll tow them to a salvage yard. The money from the scrap will go into a fund for your people, help with resettlement costs." Horvath's eyes widened. Among raiders, ships were everything. The fact that Rita was offering fair value instead of just impounding them was almost unthinkable. Over the next several hours, the Nightingale became a hub of activity. Raider families were transported across in small groups, their belongings carefully cataloged. Sophie set up a medical screening station, checking each person for health issues. Lewis coordinated with his team to ensure the process stayed orderly and safe. Plevin watched it all with growing amazement. The humans didn't just process the raiders, they talked to them, learned their names, asked about their children, treated them like people instead of criminals. "This is how humans handle justice," he asked Rita. This is how we try to. We don't always succeed. Our history is full of failures, mistakes, cruelty, but we keep trying to be better. That's all anyone can do. The youngest raider, a Kravian child no more than 4 cycles old, approached Rita with wide eyes. Are you really from the Deathworld? Rita knelt down to the child's level. I am. Earth is my home. Is it scary there? Sometimes, but it's also beautiful, and it teaches us to be strong so we can help others. The child thought about this. My mama says humans are dangerous. We can be, but dangerous doesn't mean bad. A doctor's knife is dangerous, but it saves lives. It's all about how you use it. Plevin felt something shift in his understanding. The assembly classified worlds by danger level. Class 1, Paradise Worlds through Class 12, Deathworlds. Earth was Class 12, the highest rating, a planet so hostile that the fact humans had evolved there at all was considered remarkable. But maybe, Plevin thought, that danger had shaped humans into something the galaxy needed. People who didn't freeze when disasters struck, who didn't wait for committees to approve emergency responses, who understood that sometimes the universe required quick action and moral flexibility. Captain Okonkwo, Plevin said, when the Assembly peacekeepers arrive, I'll be filing a full report. It will include everything that happened here, including your unauthorized intervention. Rita nodded. I expected as much. But I'll also be recommending that the Assembly fast-track authorization for human emergency response in this sector. What you did today saved lives. The proper channels would have taken too long. The Assembly won't like that recommendation. Probably not, but I'm a scientist. I follow evidence, not politics, and the evidence says you were exactly what we needed, even if you weren't what we expected. Commander Vyerth arrived exactly 37 hours after the initial distress call, which the Assembly considered excellent response time. His peacekeeping vessel, the Harmonious Resolution, docked with Research Station Verdes 7, expecting to find traumatized researchers and evidence of a brutal raid. Instead, he found humans. Director Plevin, Vyerth said, his crest flaring in agitation. Your report mentioned raiders. Where are the perpetrators? Currently aboard the human vessel Nightingale, undergoing medical evaluation and processing for refugee status. Vyerth's crest flattened. Refugee status? These were criminals who attacked an Assembly research station. They should be in custody awaiting trial. Rita stepped forward. Commander Vyerth, I'm Captain Okonkwo. My crew responded to the distress signal while you were still in transit. We secured the station and detained the raiders. Upon investigation, we determined they were desperate refugees from the Devlin colony collapse. That's not your determination to make. You're not authorized for law enforcement in this sector. You're not even supposed to be here. The diplomatic conference you were attending was 3 systems away. The conference was boring. The distress call was urgent. We prioritized. Vyerth turned to Plevin. Director, I need you to explain exactly what happened here, from the beginning. Plevin led Vyerth through the events. The initial attack, the desperate hours waiting for help, the arrival of the Nightingale at speeds that should have been impossible, the human boarding team that disabled the raiders without killing anyone, the medical treatment provided to both sides, the offer of rehabilitation instead of prosecution. This is highly irregular, Vyerth said. The Assembly has protocols for situations like this. Your protocols would have arrived too late, Plevin said quietly. The raiders would have broken through our defenses within an hour. By the time your ship arrived, this would have been a recovery operation, not a rescue. That's speculation. That's mathematics. I can show you the calculations if you'd like. Vyerth's crest rippled with frustration. He had spent 20 years in the peacekeeping forces, rising through the ranks by following every regulation perfectly. The idea that proper procedure might have resulted in casualties was deeply uncomfortable. Regardless of timing, the humans had no authority to intervene, Vyerth insisted. They had the authority of basic decency, said Dr. Haven. The insectoid scientist had been quiet during most of the debriefing, but now he stepped forward. Commander, I have worked in assembly space for 30 years. I have always believed in our systems, our protocols, our civilized approach to conflict. But I watched these humans risk their lives for strangers. I watched them show mercy to people who attacked us. I watched them offer second chances instead of revenge. Mercy that undermines the justice system. Does it? Or does it highlight the flaws in a system that left 3,000 colonists to die because evacuation required too many approvals? The room fell silent. Mentioning Devlin was dangerous. The assembly was still conducting inquiries into that disaster, and several high-ranking officials were quietly being reassigned. Vyerth's crest went completely flat. Dr. Haven, that's a separate issue. Is it? Because from where I'm standing, it's all connected. The assembly moves slowly because we're afraid of making mistakes, but sometimes slow means people die. The humans move fast because they're willing to take risks. Sometimes that's reckless, but today it saved our lives. Rita cleared her throat. Commander, I understand your position. We did bypass protocol, but I'd like you to meet some of the people we're processing. She led Vyerth to the common area where several raider families waited. Horvath was there with his daughter, a young Kravian girl who clung to her father's arm, a Thurian couple with their infant son, an elderly Centauri who had lost everything in the colony collapse. This is Myra, Rita said, gesturing to the Kravian girl. She's 6 years old. She hasn't had a real meal in 2 weeks. Her medical scans show early signs of malnutrition. Her father made terrible choices, but he made them trying to keep her alive. Vyerth looked at the child. That doesn't excuse the crime. No, it doesn't, but it does contextualize it. These people didn't attack the station because they wanted to. They did it because they saw no other option. The assembly abandoned them, so they abandoned the assembly's rules. The assembly did not abandon Devlin. There were logistical challenges that delayed evacuation. 17 different approval processes, Rita said quietly. I read the report. 17 different committees that each had to sign off before rescue ships could launch. How many of those approvals actually saved lives, Commander? And how many just covered bureaucratic posteriors? Vyerth wanted to argue, but he had read the same report. He had seen the timeline. He had wondered, in private moments he would never admit to, whether the system he served had failed those colonists. What you're suggesting would require changing fundamental assembly procedures, Vyerth said. I'm not suggesting anything. I'm just pointing out that when people are dying, sometimes the proper channels are too slow. And maybe, just maybe, the galaxy needs people willing to break rules when lives are at stake. Plevin stepped forward with a data pad. Commander, I've prepared my official report. It details everything that happened, including the human intervention. I've also included a recommendation that the Assembly grant humans emergency response authorization in this sector. You're recommending we legitimize their unauthorized actions. I'm recommending we learn from them. The humans arrived in 42 minutes. You arrived in 37 hours. Both responses followed the capabilities and protocols of their respective systems, but only one response actually saved lives. Vyerth took the data pad. He could already see the political headache this would cause. The Assembly didn't like being told their systems failed. They especially didn't like being shown up by a species from a death world, a species that most Assembly members considered barely civilized. But he was also a realist. The evidence was clear. The humans had succeeded where Assembly protocols would have failed. I'll forward your report, Vyerth said finally, but I can't promise the Assembly will accept your recommendations. I understand, but I had to try. Vyerth turned to Rita. Captain Okonkwo, regarding the raiders, they are technically subject to Assembly jurisdiction. You cannot simply take them without a formal extradition process. Then let's formalize it. We'll file the paperwork. The raiders will voluntarily request transfer to human refugee programs. You get compliance with protocols. They get a second chance. Everyone wins. Except the people who want to see them punished. Commander, punishment without purpose is just revenge. These people aren't a threat anymore. They're refugees who need help. We can provide that help. Can the Assembly? Vyerth didn't answer immediately. The honest answer was no. The Assembly's refugee programs were overwhelmed, underfunded, and mired in the same bureaucratic delays that had doomed Devlin Colony. Processing the raiders through proper channels would take years. They would sit in detention facilities, costing resources, accomplishing nothing. If I allow this, Vyerth said slowly, it sets a precedent. Other species will ask why humans get special treatment. Then extend the same option to everyone, Rita suggested. Let any member species participate in refugee rehabilitation, share the burden and the benefit. It was a diplomatic answer, one that Vyerth could work with. I'll include that suggestion in my report as well, but Captain, you need to understand something. The Assembly exists to prevent chaos. Rules matter, protocols matter. Without them, we revert to the violence of earlier ages. Agreed, but rules should serve people, not the other way around. When protocols kill instead of save, maybe it's time to examine those protocols. Vyerth looked around the station, at the researchers who had been saved, at the raiders who had been shown mercy, at the humans who had risked themselves for strangers. It all violated proper procedure. It all ignored established protocols. And it had worked. Your report will be noted, Director Plevin, Vyerth said formally. And Captain Okonkwo, consider this an official acknowledgement of your actions. The Assembly may not approve, but I do. You saved lives today. That matters more than paperwork. Rita smiled. Thank you, Commander. That means a lot coming from you. Don't thank me yet. The Assembly Council will likely want to speak with you directly. They don't enjoy being circumvented, even when the outcome is positive. I'll face whatever comes, but I won't apologize for helping people. Vyerth's crest rippled in what might have been approval. Good. The galaxy needs more of that, even if the Assembly isn't ready to admit it yet. 3 weeks later, Dr. Haven stood in the transportation hub of Station Meridian, waiting for his assignment transfer to finalize. Around him, the usual chaos of interspecies travel hummed along. Thurians arguing about cargo weights, Centauri reviewing travel documents, Kravians herding their families toward departure gates. His personal communicator chimed, a message from Rita. Dr. Haven wanted to give you an update. The Devlin refugees are settling in well. Horvath and his daughter are in a training program for station maintenance work. The Thurian couple you met opened a small restaurant in the human quarter. They make this dish called tamales that apparently the humans can't get enough of. Even the elderly Centauri found work as a cultural consultant. Turns out humans are fascinated by Assembly history when it's taught by someone who lived it. Anyway, thought you'd want to know your recommendation made a difference. Safe travels to Earth. We'll see you soon. Haven clicked his mandibles in satisfaction. His request for assignment to the Human Medical Exchange Program had been approved faster than he expected. The Assembly was still debating the broader implications of what had happened at Verdes 7, but they couldn't deny the value of cross-cultural learning, especially when that learning involved medical techniques that could save lives. His transport was called. Haven gathered his belongings and joined the queue. Around him, several other Assembly scientists were also heading to Earth for various exchange programs. The Nightingale incident had sparked curiosity about human methods across multiple disciplines. On Research Station Verdes 7, Plevin reviewed the latest communication from Assembly headquarters. His report had caused exactly the political storm he had anticipated. 3 committees had been formed to investigate the incident. 2 more were studying whether to expand emergency response protocols. And one very angry diplomat had sent 7 messages demanding to know why Plevin hadn't simply ordered the humans to leave. But buried in all the bureaucratic noise was one important line: authorization granted for limited human emergency response in Sector 7G pending further review. Limited pending. The assembly never moved quickly, but they moved, and that was something. Rena, the young researcher, entered his office carrying a data pad. "Director, we're receiving another survey request. They want to know our opinions on integrated emergency response protocols." "Another one. That's the 5th survey this week. The assembly wants to be thorough." Plevin clicked his tongue in amusement. The assembly wants to cover themselves politically, but answer honestly. Tell them what you saw. That humans are terrifying but effective. That humans are different. That difference can be an asset if we're willing to learn from it. Rena nodded and left. Plevin turned back to his stellar charts. The research continued. The station operated normally again, but something had changed, something subtle but profound. The galaxy felt a little less certain than it had before, but also a little safer. Because now everyone knew. If you sent out a distress signal, there was a chance that help would arrive in 42 minutes instead of 42 hours. It might come from an unexpected source. It might violate every protocol in the book, but it would come. Aboard the Nightingale, Rita reviewed the latest assignment. Another diplomatic conference, this time actually in Sector 7G. The assembly was being very careful to schedule human participation in regions where they now had emergency response authorization. Danny looked up from the communication console. "Captain, we're being hailed by a civilian transport. They're requesting medical assistance. One of their passengers is having some kind of cardiac event." Rita checked the distance. "How far?" 20 minutes at standard cruise. Assembly medical ships are 3 hours away." Lewis smiled from his station. "So we're the closest responders again." "Seems to be becoming a habit," Rita agreed. "Navigation, plot an intercept course. Medical team, prepare for emergency transport. Let's go save some lives." The Nightingale changed course, its engines burning bright in the darkness. Behind it, the assembly would file reports, form committees, debate protocols. That was their way, and it served important purposes. But sometimes, the galaxy needed people willing to act first and fill out paperwork later. Sometimes, the galaxy needed Deathworlders. On Earth, in the Human Coordination Center, Horvath sat in a classroom learning the basics of zero-gravity welding. His daughter attended school in the building next door, where she was learning to read assembly standard and making friends with human children who thought having 4 arms was the coolest thing ever. During lunch break, Horvath stepped outside and looked up at the sky. Somewhere out there, beyond the blue atmosphere of Earth, the Nightingale was probably racing toward another emergency, the ship that had given him and his people a second chance. He had written to Rita once, trying to explain what her mercy meant. She had written back with typical human directness. "Just pay it forward. Help someone else when you can. That's how we make the galaxy better." Simple advice, profound impact. A notification came through on his work pad. His supervisor needed him for a practical welding test. Horvath headed back inside, ready to prove he deserved the chance he had been given. Across the galaxy, in a dozen different locations, similar stories were unfolding. The Thurian couple serving tamales to curious humans. The elderly Centauri teaching history to fascinated students. Dr. Haven preparing for his first day in a human hospital, simultaneously excited and terrified. And in the Assembly Council chambers, a very quiet debate was happening about what it meant to be civilized, about whether safety came from avoiding risk or from accepting it, about whether the rules existed to serve people or whether people existed to serve the rules. The debate would continue for years. Committees would form, reports would be written, protocols would be slowly, painfully revised. But out in the black, where distress signals still echoed and disasters still struck, response times were already changing. Because everyone now knew the truth. When you called for help, you might get peacekeepers with proper authorization and perfect paperwork. Or you might get Deathworlders with good intentions and better reaction times. And when your life hung in the balance, you learned to appreciate the difference. Rita sat in the captain's chair, watching the stars stream past. Another emergency handled. Another life saved. Another report to file that would probably annoy some diplomat somewhere. She smiled. This was exactly the job she had signed up for. "Captain," Danny said, "I'm picking up another distress signal. Merchant vessel with engine failure. They're drifting toward a gravity well." "How far?" 38 minutes. Assembly response time is 4 hours. Lewis was already moving toward the airlock. Engineering team is standing by. Sophie grabbed her medical kit, just in case. Rita checked the navigation plot. They could make it. They always made it. That was what humans did. That was what Deathworlders did. "Change course," she ordered. "Let's go be the wrong help that shows up at the right time." The Nightingale turned again, its crew already preparing for whatever came next. Behind them, the galaxy continued its slow rotation, unchanged and eternal. But maybe, just maybe, a little bit better than it had been before. Because sometimes the best help comes from the most unexpected places. And sometimes, when allies can't reach you in time, Deathworlders arrive instead. And that makes all the difference.